The first thing Ava Monroe saw was her son's name printed in gold on a guest list that should never have existed. Not Liam Monroe, not the name on his school forms, not the name on his passport. The list called him Liam Varrone. For one breath, the casino around her disappeared. The private VIP floor of the Royal Etoile shimmered under crystal chandeliers, all black marble, gold railings, mirrored ceilings, velvet ropes, champagne towers, and men in tuxedos who smiled like they owned countries. Beyond the glass wall, Monaco glittered against the dark Mediterranean, a kingdom of money balanced on cliffs and secrets. Ava stood behind the reception podium with a headset in her ear and a tablet trembling in her hand. She was supposed to be checking seating assignments for billionaires, ministers, royal cousins, and men whose names had been carefully abbreviated for security reasons. Instead, she was staring at her 6-year-old son's name. Table 7. Private Salon C. Classification. Protected asset. Her mouth went dry. No one at the casino knew Liam's middle name. No one knew where his after-school sitter lived. No one knew the route Ava took home through the narrow Monaco streets, changing directions twice, because old fear had trained her better than any bodyguard could. She looked up from the tablet. Across the floor, Lucien Moreau, the casino's owner, lifted a champagne glass toward a cluster of Italian investors, elegant, silver-haired, beautiful in the way expensive knives were beautiful. He caught her staring, and smiled. Ava felt the blood leave her face. Then the fire alarm screamed. The sound tore through the room, violent and metallic, slicing through the string quartet and the low hum of million-dollar conversation. Red lights flashed across the gold walls. Guests turned, startled, irritated first, frightened second. Ava moved before anyone gave an order. Her son. The staff nursery was 1 floor below the VIP level, behind a private corridor used for performers, caterers, and security. Liam was supposed to be there with Camille, the only babysitter Ava trusted in Monaco. She ripped the headset from her ear and ran. "Ava," someone shouted behind her. She didn't stop. Smoke rolled under the double doors at the end of the hall. Not a drill. Her heels skidded on marble. She kicked them off and ran barefoot, her black event dress catching around her knees, her name badge slapping against her chest. The casino that had seemed untouchable 10 minutes ago was becoming a maze of screams, alarms, and flashing emergency lights. At the stairwell door, a security guard stepped in front of her. "Madame Monroe, guests must evacuate through the main. My son is downstairs." His expression changed, not with sympathy, with recognition. Ava saw it, the tiny flicker in his eyes, the way his hand moved toward the radio at his waist instead of the door. She grabbed the heavy brass stanchion beside the velvet rope and swung it into his knee. He went down with a curse. Ava shoved through the stairwell door. Smoke hit her throat. She coughed, one hand over her mouth, and descended into pulsing red darkness. "Liam!" she screamed. Her voice vanished beneath the alarm. At the bottom landing, the corridor was already half swallowed by smoke. The air tasted like burned wiring and chemicals. A kitchen cart had been overturned. Silver trays scattered across the floor. Somewhere, glass shattered. Someone sobbed in French. Then Ava heard him. "Mom!" A small voice. Terrified. Distant. Alive. She stumbled forward, coughing so hard her eyes blurred. The nursery door stood open at the far end of the corridor, but the hallway between them glowed orange. Fire crawled up the wall near the service elevator, licking the ceiling like a living thing. "Liam?" She tried to run toward it. An arm caught her waist from behind and yanked her back so hard her feet left the ground. Ava fought instantly. Elbow, nails, teeth, every desperate instinct of a mother who had run once and promised herself she would never be trapped again. "Let me go!" The man holding her did not flinch. He turned her around, and Ava found herself staring into the coldest pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. Dante Varrone. She knew him because everyone at the Royal Etoile knew him, even those who pretended they didn't. His name lived in whispers in back hallways and suddenly silent elevator rides. He was not on the casino's public guest list, but half the private floor had been built because men like him needed rooms where laws entered politely and left quickly. Tall, broad-shouldered, black tuxedo, dark hair combed back from a face cut in hard, beautiful lines. No panic, no sweat, no shock, only control. He held Ava with one arm, as if her entire body weighed nothing. "My son is in there," she choked. "I know." The answer landed like a blade. Ava froze. "What did you say?" Dante looked past her into the smoke. His jaw tightened once. Then he removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, pressing the collar over her mouth. "Stay behind me." She clawed at his wrist. "No, who are you to him?" His eyes returned to hers. For the first time, something moved beneath the coldness. Not softness, not kindness. Recognition. A grief so controlled it looked like anger. Before he could answer, a scream tore from the nursery. Dante released Ava and walked into the fire. Not around it. Through it. The heat shoved Ava backward. She screamed his name without meaning to, a name she had never said before, while the Mafia boss disappeared into smoke and orange light. The corridor roared. The ceiling cracked. Ava tried to follow, but two men in black suits came from nowhere and locked their arms around her. "Madame, no. My child is in there." She fought them like an animal, sobbing, choking, burning air filling her lungs. Seconds became a lifetime, the kind of lifetime a mother spends seeing every smile, every fever, every tiny hand curled around her finger, every promise she made in the dark when there was no one else to hear. Then a shadow emerged from the flames. Dante came through the smoke, carrying Liam against his chest. The boy's blonde hair was streaked with soot. His eyes were closed. His small arms hung limp around Dante's neck. Ava's scream broke. Dante's shirt was burned along one sleeve, blood darkening the side of his face, but he did not look down. He held Liam as if the entire burning casino could collapse before he would let the child fall. Behind them, guests poured into the corridor from emergency exits. Cameras flashed, phones lifted. Security men shouted. Sprinklers burst overhead, silver rain falling through smoke and flame. Ava ran to them. "Liam, baby, Liam, wake up." Dante lowered the boy into her arms, only when paramedics rushed forward, but he did not step back. His hand remained beneath Liam's head until Ava's arms were secure. Liam coughed. Ava nearly collapsed from relief. His lashes fluttered open. For a second, the boy looked past his mother and straight at the man beside her. His cracked little voice whispered one word. "Davo." The world stopped again. Ava stared at him. "What did you call him?" Liam's eyes closed before he could answer. Dante's expression became stone. Ava looked up slowly, smoke and tears burning her vision. "You know my son." He said nothing. "You know my son," she repeated, her voice shaking with fury now, because fear needed somewhere to go, or it would destroy her. "How does my son know you?" Dante glanced toward the far end of the corridor. Men were pushing through the chaos. Not casino security, not firefighters. Their tuxedos were wrong for running, but their eyes were too focused. 3 of them, then 5, then more, appearing near the elevators that should have been locked. Dante's men moved around Ava without being told. He leaned close enough that she smelled smoke, expensive cologne, and burned fabric. "If I leave," he said quietly, "your boy dies before sunrise." Ava wanted to hate him for saying it. She wanted to scream. Instead, she looked down at Liam's soot-covered face, felt his small chest rising against her palm, and understood with sick clarity that the fire had not been the worst thing waiting for them tonight. Dante took her elbow. "We're leaving. I'm not going anywhere with you." His eyes darkened. "Ava Monroe," he said, speaking her full name like he had known it long before this night. 6 men in this building came to buy your son. 1 owns a port in Marseille. 1 controls judges in Milan. 1 sent a woman to your apartment 3 weeks ago dressed as a cleaning lady." Her breath caught. He watched the truth hit her. "The casino sold you," he said, "and now every camera in Monaco has seen me carry him out alive." Ava's voice barely came out. "Why would anyone buy my son?" Dante looked at Liam. For one moment, his hand hovered near the boy's hair, almost touching. Then he pulled it back, because someone taught him a name he was never supposed to remember. Before Ava could ask what that meant, gunfire cracked through the smoke. The crowd screamed. Dante moved in front of her so fast he blurred, and for the second time that night, the most dangerous man in Monaco placed his body between Ava's child and death. The bullets did not come from outside. That was what Ava would remember later. Not the flames, not the cameras, not even the way Dante Varrone moved like violence had been trained into his bones. She would remember that the first shot came from inside the Royal Etoile, from one of Lucien Moreau's own security men. The betrayal had a uniform. Dante shoved Ava behind a marble column as glass exploded above them. Liam cried weakly in her arms. Dante's men returned fire, controlled and precise, never wild, never panicked. Guests crawled across wet marble beneath chandelier light and falling water. Ava crouched with her body over Liam's, whispering nonsense into his hair. "It's okay, I've got you. Mommy's here. Stay with me, stay with me." But the words felt thin against the truth. She did not have him. Not really, not if men she had greeted every morning with polite smiles had put his name on a secret list. Not if a mafia boss knew her son's nickname. Not if the life she had built one careful shift at a time had been watched, measured, and prepared for slaughter. Dante turned once. His eyes found hers through smoke. "Can you run?" She nodded before she knew if it was true. He looked at Liam. "Keep his face covered. You don't give me orders. I do when they keep him breathing." Another bullet hit the column. Ava flinched. Dante stepped closer, and his voice lowered. "Hate me later." Then he grabbed her hand and pulled her into the burning heart of Monaco. They moved through a service hallway Ava had used 100 times to calm panicked brides, redirect drunk billionaires, and hide catering disasters from the main floor. Tonight, it looked unfamiliar, monstrous in red emergency light. Dante knew the turns without asking. That terrified her almost more than the gunfire. His men surrounded them, 3 in front, 2 behind, one carrying a hard black case that looked too heavy to hold anything innocent. At the loading bay, a black SUV waited with its engine running. Rain had begun to fall outside, hissing against the heat pouring from the casino doors. Beyond the barricades, paparazzi and news crews were already gathering, their lenses hungry. The moment Ava stepped outside with Liam in her arms, the flashes started. "Is that the boy? Dante. Dante, who is she?" Ava Monroe." She stopped cold. They knew her name. Dante's hand came to the small of her back. Not rough, not gentle, certain. "Keep walking." "How do they know my name?" "Because Moreau wanted the world to know I took you. I don't belong to you." "No," Dante said. "But they need to believe you do." She turned on him in the rain, still holding her child. "Don't you dare use me for whatever war you're in." His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "This war reached your son before I touched your life." Ava hated that she believed him. She hated the way her body understood danger when his voice lowered. She hated the way the men around him obeyed without question, the way the crowd parted when he moved, the way every camera seemed less frightening than the possibility of stepping out of his shadow. An ambulance siren wailed nearby. Ava looked toward it. Dante saw. "No hospitals. My son inhaled smoke. Private doctor. Secured location. You think I'm trusting your doctor?" His face came closer to hers, rain sliding down his cheek, mixing with soot and blood. "I think you love him enough to survive the next 10 minutes. The words struck, because they were true. Liam coughed again, small and ragged, and Ava made the choice that would haunt her for days. She climbed into Dante Varrone's SUV. The doors shut. The casino burned behind them. And on every screen in Monaco by midnight, the same image replayed again and again. The American single mother in a torn black dress, the unconscious boy in her arms, and the mafia boss leaning over them, as if the world had just learned his only weakness. The safe house was not a house. It was a cliffside villa hidden above the sea, all white stone, black glass, and security gates that opened before the SUV stopped. Rain swept across the terrace in silver sheets. Below, the Mediterranean slammed against rocks with a sound like thunder. Ava carried Liam inside, despite Dante's offer. No, not offer. He reached for the boy, and she pulled away so violently one of his men moved. Dante lifted a hand. The man froze. Ava noticed. She noticed everything now. The villa smelled of cedar, salt air, and money old enough to be quiet. A woman in her 60s waited in the foyer with a medical bag. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe knot, but her eyes softened when she saw Liam. "I am Dr. Belak," she said in careful English. "He needs oxygen and monitoring." Ava looked at Dante. He stood 3 feet away, hands at his sides, giving her the room he could have taken by force. She delivered half the children in Monaco before she began saving men who could not go to hospitals, he said. "That's supposed to comfort me? No. It is supposed to tell you she knows how to keep secrets." Ava followed the doctor upstairs to a room prepared for a child. That was the first thing that unsettled her. Not a guest room where someone had thrown a blanket over a couch. A child's room, small bed, blue quilt, books in English, a wooden train set, a nightlight shaped like a moon. Ava stopped in the doorway. Dante was behind her. She felt him before he spoke. "This room was here before tonight," she said. "Yes." Her grip tightened around Liam. "How long have you been watching us?" Dante's silence answered before his words did. "Since February." Ava turned slowly. February was when she had moved apartments after finding the same black sedan parked across the street for 3 nights. February was when Liam said a man had helped him pick up his dropped school bag near the harbor. February was when Ava had convinced herself fear made patterns out of coincidence. "You were the sedan, one of them. You followed my child. I guarded him." The slap came before she decided to give it. The sound cracked through the room. Dante's face turned slightly with the force, but he did not touch his cheek. No one moved. Not the doctor, not the men in the hallway. Ava's hand stung. "You don't get to call that protection," she whispered. "Not when I didn't know. Not when he didn't know. Not when you let us walk into that casino tonight." Dante looked back at her. For the first time, the controlled mask had a fracture. "I did not let you walk into it. I came to stop it. You failed." His jaw tightened. "Yes." The single word disarmed her more than denial would have. Dr. Belak stepped between them gently. "Madame Monroe, please. Let me help him." Ava placed Liam on the bed. The doctor fitted a small oxygen mask over his face and checked his pulse, his breathing, his pupils. Ava sat beside him, one hand on his stomach, counting every rise and fall. Dante remained in the doorway. He did not enter. He watched Liam with a stillness that felt painful. After several minutes, Dr. Belak said, "Smoke inhalation, mild burns on one hand, shock. He is lucky." Ava closed her eyes. Lucky. A word people used when disaster failed to finish its work. "He needs rest," the doctor continued. "You also need care." "I'm fine," Dante spoke from the doorway. "Your feet are bleeding." Ava looked down. She had run barefoot across broken glass and marble. Red streaked the white floor beneath her. She had not felt it until he said it. "I'm fine," she repeated. Dante's eyes lifted to hers. Being brave and bleeding are not the same thing. The intimacy of the sentence angered her, as if he had the right to see her. "I don't want you in this room." Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly to name. He nodded once. "I'll be outside." The door closed softly behind him. Ava hated that she listened for his footsteps. Hours passed in pieces. The doctor cleaned Ava's feet and bandaged her cuts. Liam slept, waking once to cry for water, once to ask if the fireman was angry. Ava's heart cracked at the question. "What fireman, baby?" Liam's eyes were heavy, unfocused. "Davo." Ava brushed soot from his forehead with trembling fingers. "Where did you hear that name?" But he had already drifted back to sleep. Near dawn, Ava left the room. Dante stood at the end of the hallway before a wall of black glass overlooking the sea. He had changed into a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. A burn marked one wrist. His hair was damp. There was a shallow cut at his temple, untreated. He looked as if sleep was something he had not trusted in years. Ava walked toward him slowly. I want the truth. You want all of it? I want enough to know whether I should run from you. His mouth curved without humor. If running worked, you would not be here. She almost turned back. Instead, she said, Who is Davo? The name changed him, not dramatically. Dante Varrone was too disciplined for that, but the air around him altered. His eyes shifted to the window, to the black water below. My younger brother, he said. Davide. Liam heard the name as a baby. Ava's body went cold. That's impossible. Yes. You're lying. I wish I were. She gripped the back of a chair. Liam was a year old when I left the States. His father, Cole Whitaker, was not his father. Ava's breath stopped. The villa went silent except for the rain against the glass. Dante turned. Sit down. No. Ava, don't say my name like you know me. I know what Cole did to you. She flinched. There it was. The past she had buried under new jobs, new passwords, new locks, new countries. Cole Whitaker, charming in public, cruel in private. The man who had controlled money, friends, clothes, sleep. The man who had smiled while explaining that no court would believe a woman with no family and a toddler. The man she had escaped with one suitcase, a fake work reference, and Liam asleep against her chest. Dante's voice lowered. I know he told you Liam was his. I know he used that lie to keep you afraid. I know he signed documents he had no right to sign. Ava's throat tightened. Stop. Cole sold those documents to Monroe 6 months ago. She shook her head. No. Cole doesn't know where we are. He knows now. The room tilted. Dante stepped forward, then stopped himself when she stiffened. His hands curled at his sides, restraint visible in every line of his body. My brother Davide met you in New York 7 years ago. Ava's memories rose, unwanted. A small restaurant in Queens, where she had worked double shifts before her life became a cage. A kind man with tired eyes, who came in every Thursday and ordered coffee he never finished. David Vale, he had called himself. Quiet, gentle. He had walked her to the subway once, when a drunk customer followed her. He had kissed her once, in the rain outside the restaurant, and apologized, like the kiss had frightened him too. Then he disappeared. 3 months later, Ava met Cole at a fundraiser where she was working coat check. 6 weeks after that, she learned she was pregnant. Cole had been delighted too quickly, possessive too quickly, certain too quickly. Ava pressed a hand to her mouth. David, she whispered. Davide Varrone, Dante said. My brother. He was hiding in America under a false name because he had stolen something from our father and from every family that wanted a share of the Mediterranean ports. What did he steal? A ledger, old accounts, bribes, murders, offshore holdings. Enough to destroy governments and crime families on both sides of the Atlantic. Ava stared at him. And Liam? Dante's eyes darkened. Davide did not hide the ledger in a bank. He hid access to it in a blood trust that activates only through his legal heir. No. Ava, no. Her voice broke. He's 6. He likes dinosaurs and pancakes and pretending he hates broccoli. He has not access to anything. To you, he is a child. To them, he is a key. The cruelty of it made her sway. Dante moved then, fast enough to catch her if she fell, but he stopped inches away when she looked at him. That was somehow worse. That he understood fear well enough not to touch it. Ava folded her arms around herself. You knew. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I did not know if you were part of it. Her eyes snapped to his. You thought I sold my son? I thought everyone was capable of betrayal until proven otherwise. Is that how you live? It is why I'm alive. She hated him in that moment. Hated his calm. Hated his logic. Hated that a world existed where suspecting a mother of selling her child could be called strategy instead of sickness. But beneath the hate, another truth moved. He had walked into fire. Not sent men, not issued orders, not watched from a safe distance. He had gone in himself. Why did Liam call you Davo? Dante's face hardened, but this time she saw the grief under it. When he was a baby, before Cole took full control of you, Davide came to see him once. I was outside. Liam was too young to remember faces clearly, but Davide held him and kept saying, "Little star, it's Davo." Ava's eyes burned. "I don't remember that. Cole drugged you that night." The words landed softly. That made them worse. Ava gripped the chair until her fingers hurt. Memories flashed wrong now. Waking heavy. Cole smiling too gently. Liam asleep in a blanket she had not chosen. A strange ache in her arm. A missing evening she had blamed on exhaustion. Dante's voice became quiet. "My brother died 2 days later." Ava closed her eyes. The man from the rain. The gentle kiss. The coffee growing cold. Dead. "And you think Liam remembered?" "No," Dante said. "I think someone made sure he heard that name recently." Ava opened her eyes. "Who?" Before Dante answered, his phone vibrated on the table. He looked at the screen. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. He turned the phone toward her. A video filled the screen. Lucien Moreau stood in the burned remains of the Royal Etoile's VIP floor, immaculate despite the destruction. Behind him, police lights flashed through smoke. His expression was grave, wounded, perfectly designed for television. A caption scrolled beneath him. "Casino owner accuses mafia boss of abducting American mother and child." A reporter asked, "Monsieur Moreau, are you saying Dante Varrone started the fire?" Lucien looked straight into the camera. "I am saying Miss Monroe discovered something she should not have seen. I attempted to protect her. Varrone took her before authorities could help. That little boy may now be in the hands of one of Europe's most dangerous men." Ava's stomach turned. Dante took the phone back. The video continued, but his eyes stayed on her. "Now you understand the game." Ava's voice shook. "He's making you look like the kidnapper." "No," Dante said. "He is making you look like my accomplice." By noon, Ava's face was everywhere. American mother missing after Monaco casino fire. Mafia boss linked to child abduction. Mystery boy tied to secret European crime summit. The news networks used the worst possible photograph. Ava in Dante's SUV, wet hair stuck to her face. Liam clutched in her arms. Dante leaning over them like a captor. The truth had no chance against the image. Dante's villa became a fortress. Black SUVs lined the driveway. Armed men moved across the grounds. Security feeds covered an entire wall in the lower level. Monaco streets, harbor exits, airports, hotel lobbies, casino corridors. Ava saw herself on one screen from 3 weeks earlier, carrying groceries outside her apartment, while Liam jumped over puddles. She stared at it until Dante noticed. "You kept footage of us." "Yes. You don't hear how insane that sounds? I hear how alive you are. That isn't an answer. It is the only one that matters to me." The words were too possessive, too calm. They should have repulsed her completely. Instead, they made something uncertain move under her anger. She hated that too. Liam woke in the afternoon, hoarse but alert. He sat in bed with a stuffed lion one of Dante's men had apparently procured from nowhere, and watched cartoons dubbed in French. Ava stayed beside him, pretending not to notice Dante standing outside the half-open door. Liam noticed. "Is he in trouble?" Ava brushed his hair back. "Who?" "The fireman." Dante's shadow shifted in the hallway. Ava forced a gentle voice. "No, baby. People were scared of him." "Yes. Are you scared of him?" Ava looked toward the door. Dante did not move. "I'm still deciding." Liam considered this with grave 6-year-old seriousness. "He carried me." "I know," he said, not to breathe the black smoke. Ava's hand froze. "You remember?" "A little. What else do you remember?" Liam looked at the stuffed lion. "The nice old man told me to wait in the blue room. He said Mommy had a surprise." Ava's skin prickled. "What nice old man?" "The casino man. Mr. Lucien." Her heart turned over. Dante entered the room before she called him. "Liam," he said, voice low but not frightening. "Did Mr. Lucien give you anything?" Liam looked at Ava for permission. She nodded, though every instinct wanted to cover his ears and carry him to a world without men asking dangerous questions. The boy reached beneath the pillow and pulled out a small gold casino chip. Ava had not seen it before. Dante did not touch it at first. He stared. Then he took a folded handkerchief from his pocket, accepted the chip carefully, and turned it over. On one side was the Royale Étoile crest. On the other was engraved a symbol Ava did not recognize, a crown split by a blade. Dante's face became unreadable. "What is it?" Ava asked. "An invitation. To what?" His eyes lifted to hers. "An auction." Ava stood so quickly the chair scraped back. "No, no one is auctioning my child." Dante closed his fist around the chip. "Not if I buy the entire room first." The way he said it should have sounded arrogant. It sounded like a vow. That night, Dante summoned his world to the villa. Ava watched from the upper balcony as men arrived in black cars with tinted windows and no visible license plates. Some were old, some young. Some looked like bankers, others like soldiers pretending to be businessmen. They entered Dante's library one by one and came out paler than before. At 10, Ava found him alone at the grand piano in the dark. He was not playing. He sat on the bench with the gold casino chip on the polished wood before him. The room smelled of rain and leather. Beyond the glass doors, lightning flickered over the sea. Ava should have turned away. Instead, she said, "Do you ever sleep?" Dante did not look surprised. "No. That explains a lot." His mouth almost moved. Not a smile. The ghost of one. Ava stepped into the room. The distance between them felt charged in a way she did not trust. Maybe danger did that. Maybe after someone had stood between you and bullets, your body became confused and called fear something softer. She wrapped her arms around herself. "What happens now?" "Moreau hosts the auction tomorrow at midnight." Her stomach clenched. "Where?" "Beneath the casino." It burned. The public rooms burned. The private vaults did not. Of course they didn't. Dante looked at the chip. Europe's old families used Monaco as neutral ground for decades. Money above, blood below. And Lucien runs it. Lucien rents it. Men like him survive by convincing predators he can feed them without becoming food. Ava came closer despite herself. "And you?" Dante's eyes lifted. "I became the thing they feared would come if they touched what was mine." The words moved through her slowly. What was mine? She should have corrected him. Liam was not his. She was not his. Their lives were not assets in his empire. But the way he said it was not ownership, not exactly. It was something darker. A man who had lost too much deciding the world would not take one more thing from his hands. "Your brother," she said. "Did you love him?" The question seemed to strike harder than she expected. Dante looked away. "Yes." "What happened to him?" "My father ordered him killed." Lucien arranged the location. Cole delivered him. Ava's breath caught. "Cole? Your ex-husband built shell companies for criminals. He was useful because he looked harmless. Davide trusted the wrong face." Ava sat slowly on the arm of a chair. "Cole always hated Liam," she whispered. Not openly. He performed fatherhood when people watched. But alone, he looked at him like Liam had stolen something from him. He knew. The room seemed too cold. He knew Liam wasn't his? Yes. And he kept me anyway. "Cole did not want you," Dante said, and his voice had gone dangerously quiet. "He wanted control of the heir. You were the chain around the child." Ava's eyes filled before she could stop them. She turned away, humiliated by the tears, furious that they had come in front of him. Dante stood. She heard him approach, then stop behind her, not touching, always, almost touching. "Ava, don't." He went silent. She wiped her face quickly. "I escaped him. I thought that meant something. It did." "Then why am I still running?" His voice softened by 1 degree, and somehow that single degree was devastating. "Because no one taught you the difference between running alone and being hunted by cowards." She let out a broken laugh. "That's supposed to help?" "No." "Then what is it supposed to do?" "Tell you I know who deserves your fear." She turned. He was close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. The storm outside painted his face in flashes of silver. He looked brutal and beautiful and impossible to trust. "And do you deserve it?" she whispered. "Yes." The honesty stole the air between them. Dante looked at her mouth, only for a second, but she saw it. Her pulse stumbled. He saw that too. The room changed, not softer, more dangerous, like a wire pulled tight enough to sing. He lifted his hand, slowly, as if giving her every chance to move away. His fingers stopped inches from her cheek. Ava did not breathe. Then Liam coughed upstairs. Dante dropped his hand immediately and stepped back. The loss of warmth she had not even felt yet startled her. "Go to him," he said. Ava fled before she could ask herself why part of her had wanted him not to stop. The auction began with a dead man's voice. The next night, Ava sat in Dante's armored car outside the rebuilt service entrance of the Royal Etoile, listening to Davide Varrone speak from a recording hidden inside the gold casino chip. "If this has reached my son, then everyone I loved has failed except one." Ava's hand covered her mouth. The voice was older than she remembered from the restaurant in Queens, rougher, threaded with exhaustion. "Ava, if you are hearing this, I am sorry. I thought distance would keep you safe. I was wrong. Liam is mine. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to come back. But there are men who turn love into leverage, and I was born among them." Dante sat beside her in silence. On the recording, Davide continued, "The ledger is not money. It is names. It is proof. It is every port, judge, murder, account, and child, traded by men who call themselves families. I locked it to Liam's trust, because no one would kill the key if they needed him alive." Ava's tears spilled hot and silent. "I asked Dante to protect you if I failed. He will not do it gently, he does not know how. But he will burn the world before he lets them take you." The recording ended. Ava stared at the chip. Dante did not look at her. "You knew what he said?" "No." She turned to him. He looked almost angry, but not at her. At the heir. At the ghost of a brother who had known him too well. "He left it for tonight," Dante said. "Lucien meant to play it at auction as proof." Ava's voice trembled. "Why bring me here?" "Because if I go alone, Moreau moves Liam before I reach him. Liam is at the villa." Dante's eyes met hers. "Is he?" The question turned her blood to ice. At that exact moment, his phone rang. Dante answered without speaking. A child's voice came through the speaker, shaking. "Mommy?" Ava lunged for the phone. "Liam! Mommy, I'm sorry. I woke up and Miss Camille was there, and she said you sent for me." Dante went utterly still. Camille. The babysitter. Ava's trusted person. The one woman she had let near her child. The one who knew his snack allergies, his bedtime songs, the way he cried quietly because he hated making Ava worry. Ava felt something inside her tear open. "Where are you, baby?" "I don't know. It's cold." A man took the phone. Lucien Moreau's voice was smooth as silk. "Miss Monroe, I am relieved you are with Dante. This simplifies negotiations." Dante's tone was calm enough to terrify. "Lucien, Dante, you burned part of my casino. You burned your own casino. Insurance will decide otherwise." Ava grabbed Dante's arm. He did not look away from the phone, but his hand covered hers once, hard and steady. Lucien continued, "The boy is unharmed, for now. Bring the chip, the mother, and your signature renouncing Varrone claim over the Marseille corridor." Dante said nothing. Lucien sighed. "Do not posture. We both know you care more than you should. Your brother made the same mistake. Love makes Varrone men predictable." Dante's eyes turned deadly. "You have 30 minutes, Lucien said. Come beneath the old gaming hall. No army, no police, no heroics." The call ended. For a second, the car was silent. Then Ava hit Dante's chest with both fists. "You said he was safe." He let her strike him once, twice. On the third, he caught her wrists. His grip was firm but not painful. "Ava, she took him. Camille took him. I trusted her." "I trusted." Her voice broke. Dante pulled her closer, not into an embrace, not exactly, but enough that her forehead hit his chest, and stayed there because her legs had stopped believing in her. "I will get him back. You don't know that." "Yes," he said, and the darkness in his voice made her shiver. "I do." She looked up at him through tears. "Don't say that because you're powerful. Say it because it's true." His thumb moved once over the inside of her wrist, almost tender, so brief she could have imagined it. "It is true, because I have nothing left in me that knows how to survive losing him." The confession stripped the room between them bare. Ava stared at him. He looked furious that he had said it. Then he released her and opened the car door. "Stay behind me when we enter." "No." His eyes flashed. "Ava, I am not waiting outside while my son is underground with those people. You think I want you near them? I don't care what you want." Something like admiration moved across his face, gone quickly. "No," he said. "I don't suppose you do." The underground casino beneath the Royal Étoile was older than the building above it. Ava descended marble stairs into a world that should not have existed. No windows. No cameras visible. Walls of dark green velvet. Gold lamps shaped like flames. A circular gaming floor surrounded by private balconies, where men and women sat masked behind champagne and indifference. At the center of the room stood Liam, small, pale, wearing the same blue sweater he had slept in. A guard held one hand on his shoulder. Ava made a sound that did not feel human. Liam saw her. "Mommy," she started forward. Dante's arm came across her waist. "Not yet. I hate you," she whispered. "I know." But his eyes were on the guard's hand. Ava saw his control thinning. Not breaking, thinning. The monster under the suit rising toward the surface. Lucian stood beside a gaming table, elegant in midnight blue velvet. "Touching," he said. "A mother, a child, and the man who convinced himself protection is not possession." Around the room, the rival families watched. Italian, French, Russian, Corsican. Men with inherited cruelty and women with diamonds large enough to ransom towns. Ava felt their eyes moving over her and Liam like they were appraising property. Dante placed the gold chip on the table. "The recording," Lucian said. "You'll get it when the boy crosses to his mother." Lucian smiled. "Still making demands from a weakening position." Dante's voice dropped. "You mistook restraint for weakness, because men like you do not recognize discipline." A murmur moved through the room. Lucian's smile thinned. Ava looked at Camille standing near one of the pillars. The babysitter would not meet her eyes. "Why?" Ava asked. Camille flinched. Lucian answered for her. "Debt. Everyone has a price when the right fear is applied." Ava's tears dried in an instant. No. She knew his nightmares. She knew he asks for apple slices when he's nervous. She knew he can't sleep without the blue blanket. That is not debt. That is a choice. Camille began to cry. "I'm sorry." "Don't say that to me," Ava said. "You say it to him." Dante's gaze shifted to Ava. Something in him stilled, focused, deepened, as if her anger had reached a place his violence could not. Lucian clapped once, softly. "Enough theater. Dante, sign the corridor rights." "Ava, you will sign recognition of the trust transfer. The boy remains under neutral custody until the ledger is opened." Ava laughed once. It startled everyone, including herself. "You really think I'm signing anything for you?" Lucian's eyes cooled. "I think mothers sign quickly when children bleed." He nodded. The guard's hand tightened on Liam's shoulder. Dante moved. No warning, no speech, no dramatic threat. One moment he stood beside Ava. The next, a knife was in his hand, and the guard holding Liam was on the floor, screaming, his wrist pinned to the gaming table by the blade. Chaos detonated. Gunmen rose on the balconies. Dante shoved Ava toward Liam. She ran, scooping her son into her arms as the room erupted around them. Dante's men had not come through the front. They came through the walls. Hidden panels burst open. Smoke canisters rolled across the velvet floor. Men shouted in 3 languages. Glass shattered. The gold lamps swayed overhead. Ava held Liam tight and ducked behind an overturned table as bullets tore into the velvet wall above them. "Cover his ears!" Dante shouted. She did. He fought like he had been born in rooms like this, and had spent his life memorizing every cruel geometry. He moved through smoke and gunfire with terrifying grace, disarming one man, breaking another's arm, firing only when he had to, never wasting motion. Lucian tried to run. Ava saw him heading toward a private exit behind the cashier's cage. She also saw the detonator in his hand. Dante. Dante turned. Lucian smiled and pressed the switch. The explosion came from above, not large enough to collapse the casino. Precise. Surgical. The old ventilation shafts burst open, feeding fire from the damaged upper floor down into the underground hall. Flames rolled across the ceiling. Guests screamed. Smoke poured into the room. Ava's nightmare began again. Liam cried against her neck. "Mommy, I can't breathe." Dante reached them through the smoke. "This way." Ava grabbed his arm. "Lucian, forget him. He'll come back." Dante's eyes were black in the firelight. "Not if I find him first." They ran through the private exit, down a narrow stone corridor beneath the casino. The air grew hotter. The walls sweated. Behind them, men shouted and coughed. Somewhere above, sirens began again, distant and useless. At a junction, the corridor split. Dante stopped. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "What?" Ava demanded. He looked left, then right. Lucian changed the old plans. Ava's heart pounded. Liam coughed hard. Dante looked at the boy, and something in his control snapped. Not into panic, but into clarity. He took Liam from Ava's arms. She resisted for 1 second. Then she saw his face. Not the mafia boss. Not the ruler of ports and men and blood debts. A man terrified of losing a child. "Trust me," he said. Ava let go. The word cost her everything. "Okay." Dante held Liam inside his coat and ran into the smoke. Ava followed, with one hand gripping the back of his shirt. Heat pressed against them. The corridor became a furnace. Dante kicked open a metal door and found flames on the other side. He turned without hesitation, taking another path, shielding Liam's face with his body. A beam crashed behind them. Ava stumbled. Dante caught her with his free arm before she hit the ground. For one impossible second, the three of them were locked together in fire and darkness. Liam against Dante's chest, Ava against his side, his arm around her waist like refusal made flesh. Then he pulled them forward. They burst into an old service tunnel beneath the harbor. Cold air hit Ava's face. The tunnel opened onto a maintenance dock, where black water slapped concrete steps. Dante's men were already there with boats, but Lucian stood at the edge of the dock holding a gun. Beside him was Cole Whitaker. Ava stopped breathing. Cole looked almost the same. Handsome, clean, blonde hair perfectly styled. The face that had charmed charity boards and judges and neighbors who thought Ava was lucky. He smiled when he saw her. "There you are." The old fear hit her body before her mind could stop it. Dante felt her freeze. His head turned slightly. Cole noticed. "Oh, Dante," he said, amused. "Did she not tell you? My wife has always been dramatic." Ava's voice came out low. "I am not your wife. Legally, you are many things you don't understand." Dante passed Liam to one of his men without taking his eyes off Cole. Ava stepped forward. Dante's arm moved to block her, but she pushed it down. "No," she said. "He doesn't get to stand there and talk over me." Cole's smile faltered. Ava walked toward him slowly. Her feet hurt. Her throat burned. Her dress was torn, her hair full of smoke, and fear still lived in her bones. But it no longer owned them. "You lied about Liam," she said. Cole sighed. "I gave you stability. You gave me bruises hidden under sleeves." His face hardened. Lucian glanced at him. "This is sentimental and boring." Cole ignored him. His eyes stayed on Ava. "You think he's better?" he asked, nodding toward Dante. "He kills people." Dante said nothing. Ava looked back once. Dante stood in smoke and firelight, blood on his shirt, eyes fixed on her like every instinct in him was fighting not to drag her behind him. "Yes," Ava said quietly, "but he doesn't pretend cruelty is love." Cole's mask cracked. He lifted the gun. Dante moved, but Lucian was faster. He seized Ava from behind and pressed his own gun beneath her jaw. Everything stopped. Liam screamed from the boat. Dante froze. Ava felt Lucian's breath near her ear. "There," Lucian said softly. "That is the look I wanted." The great Dante Varrone, finally obedient. Dante's eyes were on Ava, not the gun. Not Lucian. Her. "Let her go," he said. Lucian laughed. "You have no leverage." Dante's expression changed. It became empty. Ava had feared his anger. She had feared his violence. She had feared the possessive intensity in him. But this emptiness was worse. This was what men saw before they disappeared. "You are wrong," Dante said. A gunshot cracked. Not from Dante. Camille stood behind Cole, shaking, holding a pistol in both hands. Cole looked down at the blood spreading across his shoulder, shocked more than hurt. "I said I was sorry," Camille whispered. Cole fired wildly as he fell. The bullet struck Lucian's arm. Ava twisted free. Dante caught her and pulled her behind him as his men surged forward. Lucian tried to run toward the second boat, but Dante reached him first. He did not kill him quickly. He struck the gun from Lucian's hand, slammed him against the dock wall, and held him there by the throat. Flames glowed behind them from the tunnel mouth. Sirens wailed above. Rain began again, falling through smoke into the harbor. Lucian choked out, "You need me alive." Dante leaned close. "No," he said. "I need her not to dream of your voice." Ava stepped forward. "Dante." He stopped. Not because Lucian deserved mercy. Because she said his name. That power frightened her. It frightened him too. She saw it in the slight turn of his head, the way his hand loosened a fraction. Ava looked at Lucian, then at Cole, bleeding on the dock, restrained by Dante's men, then at Liam, sobbing in the boat. "Let the courts have them," she said. Dante's jaw flexed. "These men own courts. Then give the courts something they can't bury." Dante understood. The ledger. Davide's proof. By sunrise, every major newsroom in Europe had received encrypted files from an anonymous source. Names, accounts, photographs, payments, judges, ministers, police commanders, casino officials, shipping magnates, Lucian Moreau's signature on the auction guest list, Cole Whitaker's transfers, Camille's coerced contract, the planned sale of Liam Varrone's identity. The world did what it always did when secrets became too public to protect. It pretended to be shocked. Police raided the Royal Etoile before noon. Lucien Moreau was taken in handcuffs through the same front entrance where he had once welcomed royalty. Cole was extradited to the United States within 48 hours, when American federal agencies realized the ledger gave them cases they had been chasing for years. Camille disappeared into witness protection. Ava did not ask where. For 3 days, she and Liam stayed at Dante's villa. Not prisoners, not exactly guests. Something stranger, something unnamed. Liam recovered quickly, as children sometimes do, moving from nightmares to cartoons to asking whether Mr. Dante had any pancakes. Dante, who looked as if no one had asked him for pancakes in his life, ordered 4 kinds from 3 different restaurants, and then stood in the kitchen while Liam declared all of them too fancy. Ava watched from the doorway. Dante saw her. "He is difficult," he said. "He's 6. He has strong opinions about syrup. He gets that from me," I noticed. Their eyes held too long. Ava looked away first. The danger had not vanished. Men like Dante did not live in worlds where endings were clean. But the immediate war had shifted. Liam's trust was protected. The ledger was public enough to make killing him useless and dangerous. Ava had lawyers now, real ones, international ones, women who spoke calmly and made powerful men sweat. On the 4th night, Ava found Dante outside on the terrace. The storm had passed. Monaco glittered below them, too beautiful for what it hid. The sea was black glass beneath the moon. Dante stood with one hand in his pocket, the other holding a small wooden train. Liam's. "He left that in your office," Ava said. Dante looked down at it. "He said it was for me. He likes you." Dante's mouth tightened. He should not. Probably not. Ava came to stand beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then Dante said, "There is a plane waiting for you tomorrow. New York, Boston, Chicago, wherever you choose. New passports if you want them. Security that does not report to me. Money from Davide's trust. Enough that you never need to ask anyone for anything." Ava looked at him. "You're sending us away. I am giving you what running alone never gave you." "What?" "A choice." The words hurt. Because they were kind. Because he meant them. Because part of her had expected a cage and found an open door. She wrapped her arms around herself against the sea wind. "And what if I choose to stay?" Dante went still. "Ava, what if I'm tired of men deciding safety means moving me like cargo?" His voice was rougher when he answered. "Staying near me is not safe." "No," she said. "But neither is being alone. Neither is believing good manners make good men. Neither is trusting pretty casinos and polished monsters." He turned toward her fully. The moonlight cut silver across his face. "I cannot become gentle because you deserve gentleness. I didn't ask you to become gentle. What are you asking?" Ava stepped closer. The wind moved between them. The sea crashed below. Behind the glass doors, warm light spilled from the villa, and somewhere inside, Liam laughed at something on television. Alive, safe, real. "I'm asking whether the man who walked through fire for my son knows how to stand still long enough for someone to choose him." Dante's control fractured. Not dramatically. Just a breath. Just his eyes closing for half a second, like pain. When he opened them, he looked almost afraid. "I do not know how to love without making war of it." Ava's heart twisted. "Then learn." He stared at her. "I would ruin anyone who touched you. I know. I would watch every door. I know. I would want too much." "Yes," she whispered. "You already do." His hand rose slowly, the same way it had in the piano room. This time, he did not stop. His fingers touched her cheek with a restraint so careful it felt like reverence. Ava closed her eyes. The touch was warm, real, not a command, not a claim, a question. She answered by turning her face into his palm. Dante exhaled like a man losing a battle he had never truly wanted to win. When he kissed her, it was not soft. It was controlled at first, almost painfully restrained, as if he feared that one wrong movement would prove every terrible thing he believed about himself. Ava felt the tension in him, the violence held back, the hunger denied, the devotion he had not yet earned and already could not escape. Then she touched his chest. His heart was pounding. That undid her. Dante Varrone, feared by ministers and murderers, stood beneath the Monaco moon, with his heart racing under her hand. Ava kissed him back. The sound he made was low and broken, and gone almost before it existed. His arm came around her waist, pulling her close, but even then, he held himself in check. She felt the power in him. She felt the danger. She also felt the choice. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "I will not trap you," he said. "I know. If you leave tomorrow, no one follows unless you ask. I know. If you stay," his voice failed. Ava opened her eyes. "If I stay," his thumb moved along her cheek, "then every enemy I have will learn your name." She smiled sadly. "They already have." A sound behind them made them turn. Liam stood at the terrace door in pajamas, holding his stuffed lion by one leg. "Mommy?" Ava stepped back, wiping at her face. "Hey, baby, you're supposed to be asleep. I had a dream." She crossed to him immediately and knelt. "Bad one?" He nodded. Dante remained where he was, giving them space. Liam looked past Ava. "Can Mr. Dante check the windows?" Ava looked back at Dante. Something passed across his face that no empire had prepared him for. A child asking him not for money, not fear, not power, for comfort. Dante approached slowly and crouched to Liam's level. Even kneeling, he seemed too large for the fragile moment. "I checked them," he said, "but I can check again." "All of them?" "All of them. And the doors?" "Twice." Liam considered this. Then he held out the stuffed lion. "You can borrow him." "For guarding." Dante stared at the toy. Ava pressed her lips together, trying not to cry. Dante accepted the lion with the solemnity of a blood oath. "Thank you." Liam nodded, satisfied, then leaned into Ava's arms. As she carried him back inside, she glanced over her shoulder. Dante stood on the terrace holding a child's stuffed lion, moonlight on his burned hand, the sea behind him, his empire somewhere in the dark. He looked dangerous. He looked impossible. He looked, for the first time since Ava had seen him, not alone. 6 months later, the Royale Étoile reopened under new ownership. Not Lucien's, not Dante's, Ava's. The newspapers called it the most shocking financial reversal in Monaco history. They wrote about hidden trusts, court seizures, international settlements, and the American mother who took control of the casino that had tried to sell her son. They did not write about the night before the reopening, when Ava stood alone in the private VIP floor where the fire had begun. The chandeliers had been replaced, the marble repaired. No smoke, no screams, no secret guest list glowing on a tablet. Only silence. Ava wore a deep emerald gown and no name badge. She touched the new reception podium, remembering the woman who had stood there barefoot and terrified, believing survival meant staying invisible. Behind her, the elevator opened. She did not have to turn to know who it was. Dante's reflection appeared in the glass wall. Black tuxedo, calm eyes, a scar near his temple from the night of the fire. He came to stand behind her, close enough that his presence warmed her back, not touching until she leaned into him. "You could still sell it," he said. "I know. You hate casinos. I hate what men hid inside this one." And now, she looked out at Monaco glittering beyond the glass. "Now no one hides here without my permission." Dante's mouth brushed near her temple. Not quite a kiss. A promise, waiting. "Careful," he murmured. That sounded like power. Ava smiled. "I learned from a dangerous man." His hand settled at her waist. "Did you?" "Yes. He also over-orders pancakes. He has improved. He has not." From the far end of the room, Liam raced across the marble in a small suit, pursued by 2 bodyguards who looked more frightened of disappointing him than facing gunfire. "Mom! Dante! The cake has gold on it!" Ava laughed. Dante looked offended. "It is edible gold. He's 6. He requested something fancy. He requested chocolate." With dignity. Liam grabbed Dante's hand without hesitation. Ava watched the Mafia boss look down at her son's small fingers wrapped around his. The first time she had seen Dante carry Liam, it had been through fire. Now he let the boy pull him toward cake. That, Ava thought, was the miracle no camera could capture. Later, when the reopening guests filled the casino, and cameras flashed again, Ava stood at the top of the grand staircase. Reporters shouted questions. Investors whispered. Old families watched with careful smiles, trying to decide whether she was a symbol, a scandal, or a threat. Dante stood 1 step behind her, not in front, not blocking her. Behind her, where he could see every danger and still let the world know she stood on her own. A reporter called, "Miss Monroe, are you afraid of returning to the place where your son was taken?" Ava looked at the cameras. She thought of smoke, gold letters, betrayal in a uniform, Liam's voice whispering Davo, Dante's burned arms around her child, Cole's face when she stopped shaking, Lucien in handcuffs. The plane she had not taken, the terrace, the kiss, the choice. Then she smiled. "No," she said. "I'm not afraid of places anymore." The room quieted. Ava reached back. Dante's hand found hers. The cameras exploded in white light. For once, she did not flinch. Below, Monaco glittered like a jewel with blood washed from its edges. Beside her, the most feared man in the Mediterranean held her hand in public, not to claim her, not to trap her, but because she had chosen to reach for him. And somewhere behind them, Liam laughed as he stole a second piece of chocolate cake under the protection of 3 armed men who pretended not to see. Dante leaned close, his voice for her alone. "Still deciding whether to fear me?" Ava turned her face toward him. His eyes were the same as the night of the fire, cold to the world, dangerous, devastating, but not cold to her. "No," she whispered. "Now I'm deciding what to do with you." For the first time, Dante Varrone smiled where everyone could see. It was small. It was rare. It was enough to make powerful men look away. Ava squeezed his hand and stepped forward into the light, no longer the invisible event manager, no longer the hunted mother, no longer the woman who mistook escape for freedom. Behind her stood fire, blood, betrayal, and the man who had walked through all of it carrying her son. Ahead of her stood a dangerous life, a chosen one, a love that would never be simple, never be safe, never be ordinary, but it was hers. And when Dante followed her down the staircase, the casino that had betrayed her became the kingdom that watched her rise.